quarterfinal of JPDU Security Tournament 2015. We have What E on government, and we have SUD on the opposition. And motion before House is this House believes that industrialized nations that emit significant amounts of CO2 should accept proportionate numbers of climate change refugees based on the amount they emit. Without any further ado, I'd like to call upon the Prime Minister to the case within 7 minutes period.
This way is not about whether or not this way is suitable to tackle down the environmental problem. Really, this debate should be this eco-friendly country is reliable for these refugees because of the environmental problem. So this is the spirit of this motion. We say we stand on the government side. Today I have two things in my speech. Firstly, why evil eco-friendly nation is liable for the refugee who interrupt into grievance because of environmental problem. And secondly, without this motion, how it is detrimental to this refugee. So we have our model and context. Our model is that the eco-friendly country is such as United States or China, or India, and this country, they allow industry, they allow factory to emit tremendous amount of CO2 in order to keep a development of economy. It is a very selfish reason. And also we say the today's refugees such as Maldives or Tuvalu, they are about to move out or face the difficulty to move out. So because of the level of water is so low, and they are about to be faced by the facing the overwater. So also we say we set the institution to check whether this refugee is caused by the environment problem or not. And also we say institution check the amount of gas emit like now. And thirdly, so this USA or China and India have to guarantee the place to live and create the house for refugees to live comfortably. So it's our model. And also we say that we also tackle to the environment problem in other ways. Tackle to environment problem, such as we have to restrict strictly impose the other nations such as Kyoto Protocol and so forth. However, this motion to split is not about whether or not it is a suitable way to tackle down the environment problem. So this motion should be whether or not this country have responsibility to receive their refugees. So the context, we say that today's context is very, very clear. So this United States or China or India allow industry or corporation to emit tremendous amount of CO2, and because of this, the Tuvalu or Maldives citizen face the difficulty to move out, although it is not responsible for them. So it is so very important. So we have to tackle down. We have to deal with this problem right now. So first issue, why even a friendly nation is liable for the refugee to interrupt into grievance because of an environmental problem. In order to prove this point, I have two things. Firstly, why CO2 link the climate change, and second, climate change, why climate change is liable for this nation. First linkage, CO2 links the climate change. Firstly because the science, universally and scientifically, it is proven. Why? Because CO2 warms the atmosphere, and this warming atmosphere melts the ice, and the level of water increasing, and the sunlight is overwhelmed by water. So it is obvious. And secondly, why climate change is liable for this nation? Because firstly, these United States and China allow industry and country corporation to emit tremendous amount of CO2, and they just dismiss this sacrifice of Maldives people and Tuvalu people. And also secondly, because because they are informed again and again by the international society. For example, Kyoto Protocol advocates that we should tackle down right now with this environment program. However, they dismiss in order to pursue their profit by their selfish reason. And thirdly, because the economic benefit stand at the expense of the vulnerable state, so they cannot take against this country because of small. And fourthly, because this emission is accumulated from era to era, so they have much obligation to tackle down this problem. So in long term responsibility. So second question is why this way? Why this way? So because they actually deprive the land of Tsugaru or Maldives about to deprive this land. So they force Maldives people and Tsugaru people to move out, and although those Tsugaru people have no responsibility for these things, so they have to compensate these things as the same form of danger and damaging. So analogy is here. The United States in the past pushed up the Native American, and they overwhelmed Native American and deprived the land of Native American. And now United States compensates for this Native American to guarantee their land or to guarantee their house. So it is also applicable to today's case, because if we damage one way, we have to compensate this way also. So this is our principle. Yes.
The motion said that industrialized nation that emit a significant amount of CO2. That means that it is a present tense. So you are only doing it to like the people, the nation that is emitting right now. What about the nation that emitted a large amount in the past? Why don't you make them do that too?
So because this country, in the past, this country don't go this far, and also if it's necessary, and if this Japan or other country tremendously damage the environment, we say it's okay. Okay. Without, so second issue, why without this motion, how it is detrimental to the Tsugaru people or Maldives people? Because firstly, in the worst case, they have to die because they love this land. Don't want to move. So because if they are informed by the government, because they love too much, so they have to face to die. And also secondly, even if they moved out other country, but there are no legal form to help this country, no legal form to guarantee these people to house. So why is it so harmful? Because it's double punishment. Because they are victims of environment problem. However, if they illegally move to the Australia, they are also punished by the Australian government. So it's double punishment. It's so very important. So we should save this victim and these vulnerable people. So for this, we propose this motion. Thank you.
Thanks, Prime Minister. Next, I'd like to call up the leader of to open your view. Here.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a simple question. When can we punish people or nations? Ladies and gentlemen, we can punish nations of people only when there is enough evidence, right? And ladies and gentlemen, now CO2 is emitted by so many actors, like not only industries or cars or individuals, but also oaks and so on. Ladies and gentlemen, on that occasion, what is the justification of forcing in the only industrialized nation to accept such refugees? They never explain that point. And ladies and gentlemen, their burden is to prove the direct evidence about that points. And so we have it about this proposal. So three things in this speech. Firstly, so when we can punish someone or nations and so forth. And secondly, so after the plan, by accepting refugees, the government will do more industrialization, will emit more CO2 and so forth. And this is so harmful for people in Sudan and so forth. And thirdly, now the problem about the environment problem is clear, and as people who are suffering from environmental problem will be helped effectively. So let me explain one by one. But before that, let me introduce our model. So only one point. So in your parliament, we will recommend a voluntary aid so nations voluntary aid to those who are suffering from environmental problems. That's all. And water water will be included in the speech. So let me explain one by one. So ladies and gentlemen, we believe as a government should not take the responsibility for CO2 refugees. Why is that? Some reasons. Firstly, the nation's right should be maximized as well as possible, even in court. And secondly, the causal effect about CO2 problem is not clear, and in some cases, it is not a government's fault. For example, ladies and gentlemen, in your histories, environmental effect is causal environmental effect is not clear. And in the past, for example, in the drought, people may suffer from drought because of CO2, but we cannot never say where CO2 comes from. Ladies and gentlemen, on that occasions, industrialized countries may not cause the CO2 emission to that places where drought have occurred. And on that occasions, we cannot say industrialized nations are liable. And moreover, your histories is about the ice age. So ice age is the place is a time when there is a dinosaur and there is no human beings. And on that occasions, even if human beings even if there is not human beings, dinosaur is extinguished because of environmental causal effects such as ice age. And on that occasion, we cannot never say what is the real cause of environmental problems. And ladies and gentlemen, that's why that's why in the court, individuals are not punished when there is not enough evidence. Even if individuals may kill someone, so if it is made and if it is not must, so we cannot never punish that individuals. That's why, and for these reasons, the government should not be liable for accepting environmental problem refugees. Okay, so let's move on to my next arguments. So ladies and gentlemen, after taking this proposal, by accepting refugees, the government will do more industrialization and the government will emit more CO2. Why is that? Because the government will get a justification of emitting CO2 after the plan. Why is that? Because the government will think it is okay to emit CO2 by accepting refugees, and I did my duty. Therefore, it is okay and it is justifiable. On that occasion, for example, China will compare the benefits of development and the demerits of accepting of refugees. And China or India and so forth will choose the benefits of development if they have enough capacity of accepting. Capacity of accepting refugees. On that occasions, such industrialized countries will emit more CO2 more and more. What is the harm of this point? Ladies and gentlemen, what I want to say is, after taking this proposal, many people will actively emit CO2. And moreover, if they have the capacity of accepting refugees. And someone who is unknown, okay.
do you admit this proposal if we can prove the linkage between the CO2 emissions and the loss of residence of modern people?
Yes. So, ladies and gentlemen, as this CO2 is will be extended all over the world, and it is affect someone or something unknown. And ladies and gentlemen, this someone or something will include people in Tsuwan. And this is so hard because their land or their place, their residence will be actively destroyed. And this is so harmful for people in the Tsuwan. And so they have to lose their important things, their important houses or their important so identity or memory of enjoyment in the land. And all of these things will be lost after this proposal actively. Therefore, we have to change these conditions. However, in our parliament, people in Tsubaru will be as a condition in the Tsubaru and so forth will be improved in your parliament more and more. Why is that? Because in your parliament, the problem will become clear. So, for example, and we can see directly who are suffering in the current situations. For example, we can see the problem of people in the Tsubars, and we can actually do act by taking international conference and so forth, and we can set the total regulation of CO2, and this is so beneficial for these people in the Tsubars. So for these reasons, we have to do overthinking.
Thank you, Leader Bob. Now I'd like to go to Deputy Prime Minister to continue your case.
Speaker, we believe that industrialized nations have an obligation to compensate for the victims. The U.S., China enjoy their prosperity at the expense of the people in more developed spots. So they involve these people in the process of development. So we believe that industrialized nations treat them as the part of their society. And we believe that this so this way is impose a proportionate burden or responsibility to the most related actor. So we believe that our side is fair to them. So before moving on, severe rebuttal to the opposition side. Firstly, the Chiaki said in her POI that this motion is present tense or kind of things. So we cannot consider about the past emission and kind of things. But first of all, we cannot measure the past amount of emission, Mr. Speaker. So we believe that even if it's not perfect way, this is the best way to impose a proportionate burden on each country, Mr. Speaker. And in many cases, the big countries have continued to emit the much amount of the CO2 historically. So the past big emission countries are same as the present big emission country in many cases, Mr. Speaker. So we believe that this is the best way to measure their responsibility. And second of all, they said that we cannot see the real cause of environmental change or kind of things, but it's a kind of ridiculous point. Firstly, statistically shows that CO2 is a major cause, and even if it's not only one cause, it's not there are many other factors. We believe that it's a universal consensus that CO2 is a major factor that causes the environmental problems, Mr. Speaker. That's why Kyoto Protocol focuses on the amount of the CO2 emission, Mr. Speaker. No, thank you. So, and sadly they said that states are not good at trying to take responsibility or kind of thing. But first of all, the states have responsibility to make legal form to limit or restrict the amount of CO2, Mr. Speaker. So we believe that because states allow for the company to continue emit the huge amount of CO2, so that's why the companies can continue to emit a much amount of CO2. So the root cause of the responsibility lies in the countries or states, Mr. Speaker. So fourthly, they said that after in our paradigm, more emission occur kind of things, but it's totally not true and totally unrealistic, Mr. Speaker. In the status quo, the big emission country can directly see the problem. They see the real situation in Tsubao. They see the real situation in Maldives, but they continue to emit the CO2, Mr. Speaker. So the change is this kind of argument is not is unrealistic in the first place, Mr. Speaker. So as Deputy Prime Minister, I want to talk about which is good actor to take responsibility, US or China, or impose the unproportionate burden on other actors. So firstly, we believe that the US or China or the other big CO2 emitting countries has a responsibility to compensate for them. That's because the US enjoy their prosperity by producing much amount of steel or automobile by emitting a huge amount of CO2, Mr. Speaker. So they enjoy industrialized culture life by emitting a much amount of CO2, Mr. Speaker, and this CO2 affects directly to the Maldives people or to our people. So we can clearly see the connectedness of the consequences and actions that the big emission country took. So we believe that they are responsible enough to compensate for them. And compared to our paradigm, in their paradigm, what will happen, Mr. Speaker? So what will happen to the climate change refugees, Mr. Speaker? In the status quo, in many cases, this kind of Maldives refugees or the Tsubao refugees will get away to the near country like India or Australia or surrounding country, Mr. Speaker. Even though this India or Australia that comparatively less emit less CO2 to other US or China, Mr. Speaker. In this occasion, much amount of refugees go to this kind of countries which have less responsibility for that tragedy. So we believe that in their paradigm we impose the unproportionate burden to the near countries of Maldives or Tsubao. And in the worst case, the environmental refugees cannot get the land in any land or nationality in any place in the world. In the worst case, they lose the land and they forced to die, Mr. Speaker. And we believe that in these cases, especially, we push the burden on the Tsubao people or Maldives people, Mr. Speaker. So in their paradigm, what they want to do is dismiss the responsibility of the huge emission countries and only push the unproportionate burden to the surrounding countries or the environmental victims themselves. So we believe that our paradigm can impose a more proportionate burden by using the measure of the what amount of CO2 they emit. So we believe that our side is superior to them.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister. And I'd like to invite Deputy Leader of Opposition to continue his here.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government says that it is scientifically proven that CO2 causes climate changes. But that is not true. We still do not understand like, the linkage of climate changes because climate changes happens all the time. Even when the humans were alive, climate changes happen. Even when the humans do industrialization, there still was like ice age, or when the dinosaur lived, there was suddenly the Earth became warm, and the water level actually went up, and those kind of things happen, even without the human's action. And we don't think that just because there are climate change resolutions, that doesn't mean that it was the industrialized nation's fault that those things happen. And because there is still not a clear linkage from the government side, and we think they lacked some reasons, so that is why you're happy to oppose. And I'm gonna mainly talk about two things. First, I'm going to talk about even if there is a direct linkage, why it is bad for like the environment, because the international attention towards environmental problem will decrease. And secondly, I want to talk about how this motion is actually unfair to like the industrialized nation that is actually become developing right now, who actually need those kind of development. But before that, I would like to refute to the government side. They said that they said that there is direct linkage, but they only said that it's scientifically proven, and we don't see we don't really see what they said. And secondly, they answered to my like POIs, but that said that like about like why only like countries now, but they said that well in the past we can't measure what the past countries did. Well, there is already like a data of like from like 1940s or like at least, and we think that there's a data of like CO2 emission from like 1940s. So why don't you at least make them have refugees in those ages? And we see if they say they have the responsibility, why don't you actually take those responsibility for the countries that developed in the past? And we see so we don't really think that the responsibility argument really stands. And they said, well, like the big emission countries in the past also emit a lot of CO2 in the present. That is not true. Like the developed countries, they have new technology, so they can create like electricity in a more like without using less like CO2, or they can actually, because they have technology. For example, like air conditioner, you can use it with less electricity or those kind of things. So we believe that they actually emit less CO2. So we think that what they said does not really stand. Yes.
Even if we cannot figure out the root cause of climate change, don't you think we should tackle preemptively? Because if evidence is true, it's too late to save this in the future.
Yeah, well, I'm going to talk about how on our planet we can actually save more refugees, how it is actually better for those refugees. So now I would like to move on to my point. Firstly, even if there is a direct linkage, why it is also bad for the refugees and also for the whole world. And in the States, though, there is international criticism towards like nations like China or like India because there is people who are suffering because of their emission. Like international society actually criticize them, and we think that they criticize them because people are suffering, and it is like clear that people are suffering. They are losing their homes, they are losing their jobs because there is a climate change, and the international society can actually criticize, and we think that they are able to criticize because there's a universal consensus that human life is something that is important, and if you do not follow that ideology, you are not like a member of the international society. Those kind of consensus is there, so that is why we can like point out to the people in the States Code and say that those people are suffering. So you should stop emitting CO2. We can use that kind of rhetoric, but we think that after plans like China or India or Mexico, Brazil, or like the USA, we can say that we save the people. So what's the problem? What's the problem of emitting CO2? And we think that maybe even if like the government says that the environment is getting bad, but like the reason why the environment is getting bad is such a problem is because it is hurting a lot of people. And if much more bad. Why is that?
Why?
Because if it is no thank you, if it is true that CO2 actually harms the environment so much, we think that it will, as they have told you, it will be too late when we find out that it will be too late, and it will actually maybe cause more droughts, or actually the sea level will go more up, and there will be more diseases like malaria, and we think that those kind of things would happen more and more if what they said is something true. Because in our paradigm, the problem is something that is clear, is something that is tangible. We think that is the only way that it is clear, so we think that is good. And we also, it is bad for like people in Subal or Jin, because we think that, no thank you, we think that they don't want to be refugees in the first place. They want to live in the hometown, and they would like said that, well, you've been refugees, you have the minimum level of life, so what's the problem? So we think that what they want the most is living in Subal or Subal, not being a refugee. So we don't think even in their pattern we can actually save those kind of people. Secondly, I want to talk about how it is actually unfair for developed nations and developing nations. The developing nation is actually emitting CO2 now to actually develop and actually save the people's citizens' life in their whole country. So we think we think they have it is justifiable when the linkage of emitting CO2 and actually harming the environment is not clear. They have all right to prioritize emitting CO2 because actually by industrialization we can actually get more jobs, we can actually save more people on the ground, and we think that as a country it is okay to prioritize its own citizens, and we think that in our paradigm we can actually, so that is why we're happy to oppose.
Thank you, Deputy Leader of. Then I'd like to welcome Governor Bid. You're here.
Mr. Speaker, ignoring the actual problem and dismissing the whole conference about environment taking place in Sweden, in Brazil, and Kyoto, this is a principle coming from the Industrialized House, and which we find very repugnant and abhorrent, Mr. Speaker. That's why we are very proud to propose this motion. So, important question is here, whether or not the USA and China is liable for the loss of residence in model people. So, this is the important cross. This is because we have been debating about this. So before moving on to this important cross, lots of points of rebuttals towards the Industrialized House. Firstly, they said that only proposal coming from the Industrialized House to save the model people is we will have the voluntary aid coming from the developed country towards this kind of model people. Mr. Speaker, it is not effective, right? This is because it will not save the model people's life and the residents, Mr. Speaker. Just giving money will not solve this problem. This is because it is still, there is still the problem that the model people have no place to live in, Mr. Speaker. And second rebuttal towards the Industrialized House. They said this is okay to leave out this kind of problem. This is because many factors is the showing up for the loss of the model residents and long-term climate change and so forth. First, two responses. Firstly, every single social activity is based on its industrial background in any way, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, just because factors are lot, we shouldn't throw away our responsibility towards these kind of model people. And secondly, they said that if the linkage between the CO2 emission and the global warming is sufficiently proven, they will admit this proposal. Having said that, CO2, of course, we say that CO2 is not the only factor for the global warming, but still, the most fiercest factor for the loss of the Amodian people's residence, Mr. Speaker. As Deputy said, under the status quo, the countries, under the status quo, many countries don't have any incentive to actively save these kind of Amodian people. This is because it is cost too much and it has nothing to do with most of the countries. Therefore, it is quite reasonable to impose the proportionate burden towards these kind of the countries which emitted a lot about the CO2, like USA or China, Mr. Speaker. And next rebuttal, they said that we shouldn't take this proposal. This is because the increase is unclear. As the Prime Minister told you, that we need the preemptive measure to save this kind of thing, Mr. Speaker. The liquids may be not perfect, but still not perfect, Mr. Speaker. We think that this kind of improvement is sufficiently enough to impose the burden towards the China and the US. It is too late after it is very true that this is a linkage between the CO2 emission and global warming, Mr. Speaker. And no thank you. They said it is okay to have new technology. No, Mr. Speaker, a new technology will not save the Maldives people in actual places, Mr. Speaker. They actually lost their residence, which is quite a precious places for them, Mr. Speaker. And next rebuttal. They said that their deputy said international criticism will save the people in Maldives. Two responses. Firstly, if criticism is so perfect way to solve this problem, every single conflict in this world is already solved and over, Mr. Speaker. And secondly, the reason why the country will not save is, as I told you, it is costly much, Mr. Speaker. So therefore, the criticism will not solve the monetary problem inside the country's the finance, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, their criticism argument goes beside the point. Yes.
Please explain the reason why only industrialized nations should take responsibility for environmental reasons.
This is because the industrial nation, the CO2 is the best tangible item to examine whether or not this is the linkage between the CO2 and the Maldives people's residence, Mr. Speaker. That's why this is the best option. So last report from their surpass. They said the most important argument from their surpass is this. In our paradigm, a lot of countries will actually emit the CO2. This is because you have minimum standard of life in the refugees. So this kind of USA or China will not care about these kind of environmental issues. Four responses. Firstly, under the status quo, this kind of severeness is already recognized by a lot of countries like the US and even for China. And secondly, it is too late to recognize the severeness after the loss of the land, loss of the residence of the actual Maldives people, Mr. Speaker. And thirdly, the refugee is not the place that we can guarantee the minimum standard of life, Mr. Speaker. There is no toilet, there is no bathroom, Mr. Speaker. So refugee cannot guarantee the minimum standard of life. Therefore, the argument doesn't stand at all. And that's the response for their surpass. They actually make. They're happy to make these kind of Maldives people go into the criminal, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen. So, therefore, their stance to making the people into the criminal is quite socially undesirable, Mr. Speaker. So, the important question is whether or not the US and China is liable for the loss of residence in the Maldives people. Question is, who is benefiting at whose expense, Mr. Speaker? USA and China built the tremendous number of the factories and drive tons of cars, Mr. Speaker, and ladies and gentlemen. So only for their own selfish interest, only for their selfish profit, not for the Maldives people, Mr. Speaker. Actually, American government and Chinese government allowed their companies to do so. As a result, they have glorified and got rich lifestyle, right? So driving Ferrari or Toyota or Audi or living with the rich furnitures of IKEA or something like that. But we have to recognize that behind this glory, people in Maldives and Tibet actually lost their residence, Mr. Speaker, which is the fundamental good for every single citizen, Mr. Speaker. They are in the quite severe grievance. Therefore, Maldives people Maldives people has no interest in how American lives well or what kind of cars they are driving, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, American Supreme Court, as my Prime Minister provided you, as the American Supreme Court decided to compensate for the descendants of the Native American for their residence, we have to guarantee the more people for their residence instead of their past injustice like emitting CO2 and depriving their precious residence. That's why your vote should go to the side of the government.
Okay, thank you, Government Whip. Then I'd like to invite Opposition Whip to continue your case. Here.
CO2 emission, and secondly, which is good for refugees. For example, before that, one independent battle. So they say, they refuted that international criticism doesn't work because doesn't work. But we say that we do not think so because relationship with international society is necessary, and if this relationship becomes bad, it is not. It is bad for country's interest. But moreover, we say that because China, for example, cannot justify CO2 emission because they cannot say that they cannot say what they do, but they do good thing by welcoming the refugees. We say that after disposal, it is more counterproductive for China can justify can emit more and more. So they didn't respond here, so we can that problem was done. So let's move on to the first one. Why there is no 100% responsibility for current industrialized nation, and why it is harmful. So this I has explained that two connections. Firstly, like CO2 connect to the climate change, but because it's universal consent, but we don't think so because especially developing because even the Kyoto Protocol, there is a country who do not participate in that Kyoto Protocol. That means that we can say that 100 countries are admitting that connection exists. And secondly, they say that even if CO2 we admit CO2 connects to the climate change. Climate change, we do not say that we cannot say that 100% of the responsibility is caused by the current industrialized countries. And their explanation is like they can justify because current industrial big emission countries is the same as the past country, but we don't think so because we cannot necessarily say because in the case of China, maybe in the currently developed past they did not emit so much, but as they admitted the climate change happens because of accumulation of the era to era. That's why we don't think that the whole responsibility is not there. The current developed country, but moreover, if they don't, if they like the countries who already emit CO2 have a liable, while the developing country has not liable. We say that developing countries have also high incentive to emit CO2, and they already emit CO2. For example, Africa, they may slash and burn it. They may burn the trees, and they may if they cut the trees, mangrove tree so much. Maybe they may reduce the opportunity for the cars to reduce the CO2, and also they already increase the number of emission also and also there is a country that in the past they emit so much, but currently they do not emit so much. For example, in the case of Japan, maybe now they do not emit so much because technology is so high and they have technology to not emit so much. But in the past, the reason why in the past Japan emits so much because in order to develop more and in order to create the different or in order to they emit so much in the past, but they do not collect. But as they said that they can calculate the past harm, but they blindly impose the whole burden of the accumulation of the climate change burden to the current industrialized countries. We say it is so harmful because we can say that 100% of responsibility is for the current industrialized countries, and why it is so harmful because as long as we cannot say 100% of the responsibility is for them. We have to impose this proportionate punishment for them. Yes.
How do you deal with refugee just with the unrealistic volunteer work?
I include in point to second point. So that why this proportionate punishment is so harmful is that they have to necessarily take the burden of the refugees. Like they have to care about the refugees if they do not have food or if they do not have business. We say that is so harmful and harmful burden to push this is not disproportionately punish such burden because it's so harmful. But so let's talk about the second issue. What is good for the refugees? So they say that it is better for the refugees because they can have the place to live. But instead, in the case of refugees, there are two personalities, like people who want to leave. In that case, we can say voluntarily, because especially EU have a high incentive to welcome the refugees because they value the right to live or the human life. That's why we see, regardless if they are suffering from the environmental change, regardless if they are suffering from warfare or so forth, they have a high incentive to welcome the refugees so they can be safe. But in the case of people who want to continue to live, because they can in their side of the house they can say that they can stop the CO2 emission, but only on one side they can minimize the harm to justify for China to emit more. That's why in one side we can say such people. That's why we think it's better for the refugees.
Thank you, Petition Whip. Then I'd like to welcome the reply speaker from the side. Petition to conclude your case. Here.
responsibility of the climate change refugees. And we think the government side was unable to give a direct linkage of that, because the current industrial nation is emitting CO2, the climate change refugees are suffering. So we think we are already winning in this debate. I'm going to talk about two things in my speech. First, I'm going to talk about do industrial countries have responsibility for actions for those refugees? And secondly, I want to talk about which is good for the climate change refugees. That's kind of one by one. Firstly, like the government, on the first point, the government side told you that there is a scientific linkage. But even in the States, though, we don't think that it's true. If it was so great linkage, why would America, or why would not sign a Kyoto Protocol if it is so damaging to the environment? We did not understand. There is like because there, so we already told you that there is not a direct. We don't know if there is a direct linkage. So we think that what they said does not stand. And secondly, they talked about, well, even if there's a possibility that there isn't a linkage, there is still a possibility that there is a linkage. So we think we have to like save those people because it is too late. But they didn't really explain what's too late and like what's too late about like after they can actually pay it afterwards or so on. So after they understand they were responsible, so they didn't really explain what's too late. And so what's too late? Second, from the opposition time, we told you that the state should only take responsible when there is a direct linkage, and we think there isn't a direct linkage. There are two cases. Like firstly, the CO2 emission has no influence to the climate change refugees, and we told you examples of how in the past when the humans weren't even there, a lot of climate change happened, and we think those things happened because maybe the sun's activity was different or so on. I don't know, but those kind of activities happened without human being living there. So we cannot completely say that just because human does industrialization, CO2 climate change happened. And secondly, even if it was relevant, we don't really think that the current people who are actually emitting CO2 are responsible for those who are currently suffering. We told you the current people are suffering because of the past people who are emitting CO2, and we think that we don't think that the current nation that is emitting CO2 is responsible for that. And they said that the past countries are not responsible. So we think that we don't see what their logic. So we think their logic over that responsibility does not stand. And we give you an analogy of why if there is no direct link, we should not mandate them to allow to accept those refugees. There's an international concession that innocent until proven guilty. So we think that even in international law or the ICC, there is a concession that we should not make them punish them. So even if people that there are victims, that doesn't mean that we punish people just because they seem to be bad people. So we think that we talked about this analogy from the first speaker, but they never really engaged in it. So we think what our principle stands. Secondly, which is good for the refugees. We think that the refugees, what they really want is to live in their home country. The people in Tibet wants to live and die there in Tibet. They don't want to be refugees. And we already told you that after plan, the attention to environmental problem will decrease because it is not clear who are suffering. So we think international persons will be much more decreased, and we think environmental problem will get bad. So that is what happens.
Thanks for your remarks. Finally, I'd like to call from DPM to give your reply speech to conclude your case and conclude this debate as a whole. Here.
Mr. Speaker, the biggest burden on their side of the house is to prove how they can solve or at least improve the environmental problem, Mr. Speaker, because they set up their case as that. So, consider today's situation, it's unreasonable or unrealistic that they can suddenly change the situation, Mr. Speaker. Consider about that, the certain number of refugees will be coming to being, and the question is, in their parliament, who take responsibility for this kind of environmental refugees, Mr. Speaker? And they said that EU or other volunteer workers are enough or capable enough to take care of these refugees. But first of all, it's totally not true and unrealistic, Mr. Speaker. Even if EU think that the human right is important, EU also have the internal program like the immigration issue or kind of things. So they cannot compromise with this kind of strong backlash, Mr. Speaker. And we think more than that, we think that it's unreasonable to impose the burden on EU who are less accountable for the consequence of this environmental tragedy, Mr. Speaker. And even if they can show they can improve the environmental problem to some extent, they never ever explain why big emission countries are not liable for the climate refugees, Mr. Speaker. So I want to summarize this debate on two criteria: which paradigm is better to save refugees, and the second is whether the amount of CO2 is legitimate measure to decide the responsibility or not. First of all, which is better to save refugees? They said that in our paradigm, more emission by the superpower country will occur, kind of things. But first of all, it's totally not true. Why? That's because they said that the big country start calculate the cost of the accepting refugee or the cut down the emit of CO2 or kind of things. But we think in the status quo, we do not impose any burden to these big countries, so they do not calculate at all, Mr. Speaker. We believe that comparatively better in our paradigm, we can at least put the cost of accepting the refugee to this very responsible country, Mr. Speaker. So they have incentive to decrease the CO2 comparatively, Mr. Speaker. And second of all, they said that in our paradigm, the criticism towards the big country will decrease or kind of things. But first of all, it's totally unrealistic, Mr. Speaker. Only accepting refugee do not justify emitting huge amount of CO2, Mr. Speaker. People in the global society see the direct tragedy of Tsubaru people or Maldives people, so they do not think that it's justifiable to only accepting the refugee and do not think that it gives justification to continue emitting the huge amount of CO2, Mr. Speaker. And second of all, is the emission of CO2 is legitimate criteria to decide responsibility or not. They said is CO2 cannot be said that it's the major cause of environment or environmental problem, and secondly they said that they cannot we cannot consider about the past emission of the CO2 kind of things. But my partners clearly told you, even if it's not perfectly, it's comparatively good way to decide the amount of responsibility, Mr. Speaker. So even if not yet proved that the CO2 is major cause, the amount of the CO2, we believe that it's comparatively legitimate way to decide the responsibility compared to their paradigm. So we won this debate.